Well, hello. Welcome to the first of my episodes, I guess, on Proust. This is going to be on Swann's Way. Now, it's important to understand that this is both a standalone novel and also a novel that fits into a much larger scheme. Okay. Swann, Charles Swann, is a friend of the family of the narrator, who he's kind of elegant and he's kind of, refined. And he comes to visit them. And his visits are both fascinating and not necessarily the favorite thing at first of the narrator because the narrator is very young at the beginning of the novel and is very attached to his mother. And Swann's visits tend to cause him to not be able to see his mom like he wants. In fact, the novel starts with the one memory that the narrator has of this time in Cambrai. That's what the area was called, Cambrai, where Swann comes to visit, and because Swann comes to visit, he doesn't get his usual nighttime kiss with his mom. And this causes him some anxiety and becomes something that he remembers. Now, this book is very much about psychology and about the growth of awareness of the world and growth of awareness of the self. And, if we go back and we look at history of sort of the philosophy of self, we have things like Rene Descartes, who talked about how you are a thinking thing and sort of, tries to say that you can exclude everything around you and just focus on yourself as a thinking thing. And that is what the self is, that all this external stuff is not really the core of who you are. Okay, all fine and good. But then you have Kant who comes along and he says that there is the thing in itself, which is that interiority, the thing as it really is, and there's the thing given to others and appearance. The thing given to others, appearance, the world of appearance, is all we have of the things around us, according to Kant, and we can never get to the reality of the thing itself. Okay, so let's focus on that and come into the early 1900s and the appearance of Freud and the new burgeoning field of psychology, where people like William James were talking about, how the way that we think about the world determines the way that we perceive the world. Okay, and then Freud talking about the ways in which our unconscious structures our reality and structures our relationship to the world. Okay, so how is what Proust doing related to this? What Proust is doing, to some extent, is going along with that, but to some extent turning it on its head. Okay, he is talking about how not who the self is, but who the self appears to be to others as being the self that people know. So, yeah, sure, I know myself as me, but you and everyone else, everyone but me, knows me as the representation, as the appearance. So the self that I am socially is the self that I am to others. Not the self that I feel that I am, but the self that others perceive. Now, which is more real? Now, that is a very good question. And I'm not sure that in the kind of work of art Proust is working with, that's necessarily the big concern. Because the thing is, all you can ever know about me is me as you perceive me. You can never know me as I know myself. So the only me you can ever know is that appearance. So, as the novel progresses, Kant looks at people like Swann. He looks at people like his mom. He looks at people like their servant, Francois, his dad, Swann's mistress and later on wife, Odette, and their eventual daughter, Gilbert, who becomes a love interest of the young Marcel, or the young narrator. He looks at all of them through his lens of what he can see of them, and he tries to make sense of who they are. He tries to get to the core of what is underneath all the appearances, what is going on there. So that with Swann, for instance, all of that, refinedness, all of that elegantness, well, Odette, the woman that he eventually falls in love with, is a former prostitute. And he first came in contact with her in her role as a prostitute. And he became one of those kind of, saving a woman from her sin kind of people. He became kind of, oh, you don't need to do this anymore, you can be my lover and whatnot. However, there are strong indications that she continued that lifestyle behind his back and on the side with his kind of, well, it's kind of complicated. Maybe he knew, maybe he didn't. It's kind of a situation where, he has all the information he needs to know that this is going on, but he kind of like chooses not to know, I guess one could say. Anyway, and their relationship goes through various stages of him not being interested because she's uncouth and just very pedestrian to him, to being fascinated by her unusual ways, to really celebrating her and really being greatly in love with her, to being dissatisfied and disillusioned with her. It goes through all of these phases that are detailed, that are given in great detail. You get great detail about how he changes in regards to her and how his opinions of her change and how she maybe changes. Although, this is one thing about Proust that has to be understood. Whether or not you like it, you're very strongly in the mind of a young man and a boy. And although, as I understand it, some questions begin to arise about sexuality as the novel continues. At this point, very much in the mind of a very patriarchal, sexist man whose sexuality and whose sexual interests are definitely devoted to women. And in this regards, he sees women very, very strongly as the other, as the mysterious other, kind of almost in a, dark continent of Africa kind of way, as the unknowable. And so Odette and other women in this book and in other places, as the novel progresses, possess a secret that he cannot know. They possess something inside them. They are coquettish. They are irrational. They do not respond as expected. And from that lack of expectation comes part of the desire that he feels for them, the desire to know them. As he puts it, possess them. And possess here is a deliberate double entendre. On the one hand, like knowledge and possess both mean sexual. They also mean conversational intercourse. They mean getting to know someone. So there's both getting to know them as body and getting to know them as the mind, which brings us back again to those philosophical concerns about what the person is. Are these women a body, or are these women a thinking thing? Okay, the thing is, in Proust, the women very much are a thinking thing. They are a person. They do have agency. They are really there. But at the same time, he, as, the consuming perspective from which we approach the novel, from which we see things, he wants to know and possess that. But he also wants to know and possess the body. And he builds up in his head ideal versions of them. And those ideal versions become for him the reality of who they are. And when he gets to know who they really are, that illusion of reality becomes shattered, and he becomes disappointed in the reality of who they really are because they've never met up quite to his ideal. So that process of idealizing the world and then getting to know the world and realizing that the real world can never match the ideal is one of the overriding themes of what this book is about. Okay, so Swann's way is this. Swann and love is a major part. Swann's way is this approach to life as Swann sort of downgrades himself for his love and then discovers it not to be nearly as satisfying as he thought it was going to be. And as he becomes her husband, as she becomes his wife and the mother of his child, he becomes relatively indifferent to her. Whereas Odette, in her own right, desires for her daughter to have a greater social ambitions than she herself were able to have. So she kind of, as they put it, married up, and she wants her daughter to move up even higher. Okay, so all of this is what's going on here, and the way the main character fits into this is he is of that class that Swann used to be in, and he becomes enamored of Gilbert, the daughter, and more on that in the second book. But he becomes enamored of Gilbert, and she becomes his first love and his ideal depiction of what love is. As he continues, just as Odette, and particularly this this musical theme that's mentioned, becomes for Swann an ideal. Now, I can't even pretend like I've gotten close to the core of what this book is about. It's also very much about anti-Semitism and sexuality. There is a very, very, very brief, but probably very important lesbian interlude that happens at one point where the narrator watches two women. Hard to know what they do exactly, but they have some kind of same-sex sexual event. And other things. I mean, he spends a lot of time in these artistic salons where they talk about art and these kind of things, and it's all a very affected, very upper class kind of attitude and position. This is a leisure class. This class has no need to work. They don't have nobility. They don't have royalty, but they are clearly the idle rich who have nothing to do, nothing at all to do. And in a sexist and in a very class-based society, you can see how that plays out. Now, Proust himself was very much on the side of what's called the Dreyfus Affair, which is an anti-Semitic trial that happened around 1900. I can't go into it in detail right here, but with Charles Swann being Jewish, there's clearly a point of Proust to direct attention and to deal with some of the ways in which Jews are treated in the supposedly Christian society of about late 19th century, early 20th century France. Anyway, like I said, I can't pretend to have gotten to everything in this novel. It's a complex book, and this is just an introduction. I might do another one on this novel. I might move on to the next one. I'm not sure yet. All right, well, have a good night, and like or comment if you have the need or desire.